Welcome in, everyone. This is another episode of Catfish on Ice with your host, Chad Minton, rolling solo tonight. My good co-host, Rich Howe, has some things going on with his family. He is spending time with his family, and that's awesome. And so I'm rolling it solo tonight as we just watched the Preds somehow gut out a victory over the Ottawa Senators as they continue their push for the playoffs. Welcome in, everyone. We are presented by DraftKings and part of the Hockey Podcast Network. Have some things to get into tonight, obviously, as the Preds get that win over the Senators. This is episode 119 of Catfish on Ice. Glad to have you joining me. This is Chad Minton, your host. All right, so the Preds just beat the Ottawa Senators 3-2, and the big storyline is obviously Roman Josi. He's been the storyline all season long, and he's the storyline tonight, obviously. He just set the new single-season record for points in a season for the Preds, breaking Paul Kariya's record that's been standing for over a decade now. And he literally made it clear why he should not only be the Norris Trophy consideration leader, but also Hart Trophy. Yes, we're talking Hart Trophy here, because that goal he scored tonight for the Preds was Hart Trophy type of stuff there. That gave me Hart Trophy vibes because the Preds had just fallen behind. They were just kind of in one of those lapses that they go through all the time defensively. And here you got Roman Josi, who just figures out a way to get a big-time goal. And I'm telling you, these are the types of things that a team MVP does. And I can't really figure out why Roman Josi is not getting talked about more, not only in the Nashville community, but also around the league. And I think he's finally starting to get more attention. But this is like historical stuff we're seeing here for a defenseman by Roman Josi. And I realize that Nashville is always going to be a football town, and it's always going to be a Titans town. It's always going to be a Tennessee Vols football town. But I'm telling you, the stuff we're seeing from Roman Josi right now is his truly historical stuff. He is on another level. He's been doing it for months now. And it's just crazy to see it because I'm starting to become numb to it. Like, he has another 3-point night tonight, and it's becoming like expected. And that's just crazy to even say that we're starting to expect every night for Roman Josi to have a 2 or 3 point night by a defenseman. And I get that Cal McCarr is out there, and he is also an equally great young defenseman who plays very similar to Roman Josi. I know he plays a lot better, analytically speaking, on the defensive end, but you cannot deny what Roman Josi is doing this season for the Preds. And if you took him off the Preds, I'm telling you right now, the Preds would be they would be hanging out with Arizona and Chicago down at the bottom of the division if you took Roman Josi off this team. My co-host Rich Howe says it a lot, and I totally agree with him. If Roman Josi was not on this team, the Preds would not only would they not be sniffing a playoff spot, but they would be a drastically rebuilding team, much like the Arizona Coyotes, much like the Chicago Blackhawks are right now. So Roman Josi has another huge night for the Preds, and I'm just telling you right now, it's like crazy to watch. And it's not even just Roman Josi, though. It's really crazy to think about how the stars are really aligning for the Preds this season. No pun intended, considering that a team called the Dallas Stars is breathing down the Preds' necks for a playoff spot right now. But the stars really are aligning for the Preds this season when you think about their top players all having career seasons. Philip Forsberg, Matt Duchene, even Ryan Johansson is hit the 20-plus goal mark. Ryan Johansson has never been a big goal scorer since he's been with the Predators, and really for his entire career, he's never really been a big-time elite goal scorer. But he's up there with 20-plus goals this season. He's figuring out ways to make things happen. When you think about all these top players who are figuring out ways to finally produce for this Predators team, and yet still there's a chance that this Predators team will not make the playoffs. That kind of breaks my heart a little bit. And I'm not trying to be negative right now because the Predators, with this win over Ottawa tonight, they do have a 4-point cushion now over Vegas, who is just fading so fast right now. Vegas is just completely falling apart. They are probably one of the biggest disappointments of the league this year is definitely the Vegas Golden Knights. But it's still very possible with this many games left in the season that the Preds could still miss the playoffs. I'm sorry, but it's true. And so you think about everything that is broke right for this Preds team this year in terms of their top players. We don't even have to talk about Philip Forsberg because we always knew that Philip Forsberg had it in him to do what he's doing this year. So we'll leave Philip Forsberg out of this. But just think about what is going on this season and how everything has just lined up perfectly to really put the Predators way ahead of what anyone realistically expected. I can tell you, I'll be totally honest. I thought the ceiling for this Predators team was if everything breaks right, they'll make the playoffs. But I never thought that it would happen in this way. I'm not going to even give myself credit for that. I didn't think it would happen in this manner. Whereas you've got Matt Duchene just completely silencing all the critics with the way he's played this year. Philip Forsberg, we've been talking about it for many seasons that he's on the cusp of being elite. Well, he's made that case this year that he is indeed elite. Of course, you talk about Tanner Jeannot just really elevating his game to be in the Calder Trophy race. Tanner Jeannot built some fans when he first broke onto the scene last season with his play. But did anyone predict Tanner Jeannot to be in the Calder Trophy debate? Obviously, he's not going to win the Calder Trophy for Rookie of the Year, but there's plenty of reasons why you should bring him up in that debate at least. There's so many things that have happened this season with these Preds players that no one saw coming, and yet still this team could miss the playoffs. That's what's really hard to believe. And so that's just really what it comes down to is this team has had to have a lot of things break their way in terms of players having careers. That's not even bringing up Mikael Granlund, who is also having a huge bounce back year in a Preds uniform. Going into this season, he was damaged goods. No one wanted to pick him up. And it's like every time you think Mikael Granlund, he's testing the open market, he's not going to come back. And the Preds re-sign him. They bring him back. And look at what Mikael Granlund's done. I talked about this like a month ago. I wrote an article for Predlines.com about it. I'm like, everyone's talking about Forsberg. Everyone's talking about Josi. Everyone's talking about Matt Duchene. How about if Mikael Granlund wasn't on this team this year? He gets overlooked a lot because he's also not a big-time goal scorer, and he does have his moments or his stretches where he kind of is a little bit invisible and you don't notice him. But I got to tell you, I am really, really kind of excited about seeing Mikael Granlund and Matt Duchene playing together again. And you saw it tonight a little bit. I'm telling you right now, those two are on the same page, playing on the same line together. I love them on the second line together. And it's really looking like for the first time in a while, this Preds team, if they can get into the playoffs, and that's a big if, but if they can sneak into the playoffs this year, they've got the 4-line rotation with their forwards. We'll get to the defense in a little bit, but with their forwards, I feel like John Hines really has himself a solid blueprint to get an upset in the first round. The problem lies obviously with the defense and with obviously that third defensive pairing that this team has had a hard time figuring out for a while. But you've got Roman Josi, who is doing these historically great numbers, but he also has his defensive lapses as time, which you can see. He definitely is one of those types of players where sometimes he can leave his teammates out to dry on the counterattack. That's the type. He's a hybrid defenseman. He plays that way. He takes a lot of risk. It's a high risk, high reward situation sometimes with the way Roman Josi plays. You've got Matthias Ekholm, who also can have some really bad defensive lapses at times. But when you're looking at this Preds team right now and you see them beat the Senators tonight and you see them get a win when it looked really rough, it was looking like they were going to lose this game. When they fell behind 2-1, I mean, in the third period, it took Roman Josi scoring an insane, crazy goal that most defensemen cannot score to kind of get this team back to life. And that's why we're talking Roman Josi in not only the Norris Trophy conversation, but I think he should definitely be talked about in the Hart Trophy conversation for goals like that tonight. Because I'm telling you, it felt like the Preds were going to lose tonight. And it's happened plenty of times before this tonight, where this season it looks like the Preds are dead in the water and Roman Josi has to kind of dig this team out of a hole on his own with his offense, with his skating, whether it's him scoring a goal or whether it's setting up one of his line mates. He's done it all season long, and he is just not a prototypical NHL defenseman. And that's why he is so historically great this season. And so you're looking at it now, but this is really where the schedule gets very difficult for the Preds. They had to have this game tonight against the Ottawa Senators. They just had to. I mean, you've got to win these types of games because the race is not going to get any easier the rest of the way out. I've been saying this for a while, and I don't see it changing even after tonight's win. It's going to come down to that final week of the regular season for the Preds to get into the playoffs. I just don't see them getting into the top three. I could be wrong about that, and I hope I am wrong, but just the way you're looking at it, I think Vegas is still going to stick around. Even though they're fading, they're going to hang around. Dallas, I mean, come on now. They've got one of the easiest schedules remaining, and they have slowly been getting better and better as the season goes on. They've been rounding into form. So a lot of the playoff models suggest that it's going to be Preds and Stars to get the 2 wild card spots, but you still have Vegas hanging around. It's kind of a 3-team race for 2 wild card spots between the Preds, the Stars, and the Vegas Golden Knights. And so can the Preds continue to build a cushion over the Vegas Golden Knights for a wild card spot? I mean, that's what we're looking at here. And so the Preds are now 4 points ahead of Vegas. They're 3 points ahead of Dallas, but Dallas is in action tonight, and they are down 2-1 right now to the Maple Leafs. So you got to keep an eye on that game, obviously, because if the Stars lose tonight to the Maple Leafs, then the Preds have had a really, really good night in terms of solidifying their playoff hopes. Again, a lot of the playoff models really favor the Preds making the playoffs, despite the fact that up until that win on Tuesday over Minnesota, the Preds were fading fast. The Preds were looking really bad, and the playoff hopes were looking bleak. But it's amazing how two wins can just completely change your outlook, but there's still a lot of time left. I want to talk a little bit about Eeli Tolvanen and how he ended up being a healthy scratch against Minnesota and all that stuff, because that's a really bold lineup decision that John Hines made there. Again, this is Catfish on Ice, episode 119, with your host, Chad Minton, brought to you by DraftKings. Later on in this episode, if you're listening to the podcast the next day, we are going to be joined by Mason of Blues Fan Reacts and part of SB Nation. He covers the St. Louis Blues. He joined the podcast to talk about the Preds Blues rivalry, which I think, other than the Blackhawks, it's the best rival we have. It's really the most heated rival that we have. And so he joined the podcast. I always say keep your friends close, but your enemies closer. But Mason was a really awesome guest. So stay tuned for that at the end of the episode. You're going to have to download the podcast the next day if you're watching the stream live right now. This is Chad Minton, your host. Again, we're brought to you by DraftKings. We're part of the Hockey Podcast Network as we're reacting to the Preds as they beat the Ottawa Senators with a big win. It looked like they were going to lose this game, and they once again figure out a way to just pull out a win. I mean, it doesn't matter how pretty it is, just get the 2 points. And that's what they did. So I kind of want to get into Ellie Tolvanen and how he was a healthy scratch, as we've learned here. And it was really about, okay, Ellie Tolvanen's had a rough year. And it's not really been all his fault. I actually think that Ellie Tolvanen has still had a productive year, but we think of Ellie Tolvanen as a goal scorer because he's got that lethal shot. We think about him on the power play, and that's what we ultimately want him to evolve into, is a lethal power play goal scorer, a 30-plus goal scorer eventually. Maybe not quite a Philip Forsberg, but we want him to definitely go down that path of being one of those elite offensive players for the Predators in the long-term future. Well, he's just been snake bitten. I mean, he's had a rough year. His shooting percentage has really suffered. He's just had some rough moments. Even in tonight's game, Roman Josi set him up for a really good goal, and he just got credit to the goaltender, credit to Anton Forsberg, who made the save, and even you could see Ellie Tolvanen, you could see the look on his face. He was like, what do I got to do to get a goal? And sometimes that happens in the sport. I mean, you're doing all the right things, and you still can't figure out a way to score goals. And for Ellie Tolvanen, I think he just has to keep his focus, and I think he's done a good job of that. But he was a healthy scratch on Tuesday against the Minnesota Wild. And some news came out about why John Hines decided to do that. And it's one of those things where it's a tough decision for a coach because you don't want to like ruin a player's confidence, but sometimes you have to like reset everything and refocus a young player like Ellie Tolvanen is. And so I'm not totally against it for one game. I'm not against it at all because we don't know what's going on behind closed doors. We don't know the conversations that are going on in the locker room or in practice. And I think that John Hines just wanted to maybe have a teaching moment with Ellie Tolvanen when it comes to keeping everything in perspective. And because he's a very valuable future piece of this team. Like the Preds desperately need him to be a top 6 scoring player in the future. And you know, it's one of those things where it's weird to see Ellie Tolvanen as a healthy scratch because he has so much potential. He's in his second full NHL season. So anyone who's just like completely panicking over him is just really premature on that. But I think it also comes down to it took a while for him to get up to the NHL. He spent some time in Milwaukee. He when he was drafted, he had a ton of I mean, everyone knew how good he was when he was drafted. So he's had a ton of pressure on him since he was drafted, which doesn't always happen with NHL draft picks. And so he's just it's one of those players where it's just, I preach patience when it comes to Ellie Tolvanen. And when you really watch his full game and how it's evolved, the big knock on him was when he first came in the league was he was undersized. He can't play defense. He can't lay out the hits. He can't do the essential things to be an all-around NHL player. Well, he solved that. He's shown that he's an all-around player. Now we got to start seeing the goals go in. Now we got to start seeing his offensive game really flourish. And so he was a healthy scratch on Tuesday against Minnesota. Coach John Hines decided that it was a good spot to do that. And Ellie Tolvanen was back in the lineup tonight against the Senators. He could have easily had a goal tonight. Roman Josi set him up really good. And sometimes you got to do that with these younger players. You got to make the really tough decision as a head coach to healthy scratch a player. And so I applaud John Hines for making a decision like that because it's not an easy decision as a head coach to make that decision. And he did it. And I think in the end, it could be a really good, positive development moment for Ellie Tolvanen. But he gets back in the lineup tonight, registers 4 shots on goal, 3 block shots, and gets 13, almost 14 minutes of ice time. So if you're a player like Ellie Tolvanen, you got to take that in stride. Okay, I was a healthy scratch. But you know what? My whole career is ahead of me. And, you know, head coach, had me focus on some things. I totally don't have a problem with that at all. So I know some fans might be upset with it that Ellie Tolvanen was a healthy scratch over what you decide to go with in his replacement, which was Matt Luff. But then you go into tonight's game, and Ellie Tolvanen gets back in the lineup. Michael McCarron is actually week to week, and I really think that Michael McCarron has actually been a decent fourth line player, and I never thought I would say that when you at the beginning of the season. I would have never thought I would be saying that right now. But Michael McCarron has been a decent tone setter type of player. With that said, putting Ellie Tolvanen back in the lineup tonight, and unfortunately Michael McCarron being out with a week-to-week injury, I mean, it seemed like a perfect situation to get Tolvanen back in. He misses a game. He comes back in tonight. I thought Ellie Tolvanen looked really good tonight, and we'll see how long Michael McCarron's out. He's a week-to-week designation. When it comes to Michael McCarron, when you're looking at your playoff lineup, he's a tone-setting type of player. He definitely fits the Preds' identity perfectly because he plays a very rough style of hockey. He's even shown this year that he can score some goals every now and then. He's not going to be confused as a fourth-line goal scorer, a reliable goal scorer. But he's had a 4-point game this year, shockingly. And he's had some moments where he scored some big goals, and he's a big-bodied player that fits this team perfectly. So I'm sure that the team wants him back in time for the playoffs, if they make the playoffs, obviously. But I was very happy to see Tolvanen back in the lineup tonight, and I thought he looked really good. So with that said, I feel like the Preds still have a lot of work to do because even though they beat a team like the Senators, who just aren't, I mean, they are an up-and-coming team. The Senators are a very up-and-coming, decent team. But if the Preds really want to be legit playoff contenders and deep playoff contenders, then they've got to stop relying on Roman Josi to bail them out. And to a second degree, UC Saros also had to bail them out tonight. And that's kind of like, again, I'm not trying to be negative here because they got the win. They got the 2 points. It was exciting. It was a fun game to watch. But they got a little lucky tonight. I got to tell you, they really did. They could have easily lost that game, but Roman Josi figures out a way to score a goal. And so that's kind of what it comes down to there. This is episode 119 of Catfish on Ice with your host, Chad Minton, brought to you by DraftKings, the official sponsor also of UFC this weekend. And DraftKings has a really good offer for you. We've got 2 titles are up for grabs on the stacked UFC 273 fight card. Join the action with DraftKings Sportsbook, the official sports betting partner of the UFC. New customers can bet $5 on any fighter and get $100 in free bets, win or lose, guaranteed. So yeah, there's a big fight card coming up this weekend for UFC 273, and so DraftKings has you covered with our promo code THPN. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use promo code THPN. Throw down $5 on UFC 273 and get $100 in free bets no matter what. That's code THPN this Saturday at DraftKings Sportsbook, the official sports betting partner of the UFC. 21 and up restrictions apply. See the show notes for details on responsible gambling practices. And if you have a gambling problem, please see our show notes for how to get help on that. You've also got daily fantasy contests with the DraftKings Sportsbook if the sportsbook betting is not available in your state yet. All right, want to wrap it up with this tonight before we get to our interview with Mason of Blues Fan Reacts and also of SB Nation, who covers the St. Louis Blues. I thought it was really cool to see the Mark Borowiecki tribute from the Ottawa Senators tonight. Anytime you see that type of thing happen where an organization is loyal to a player that meant so much to their organization, I mean, it's awesome to see. And you could really see the raw emotion from Mark Borowiecki, who is just such a classy and good player. I know we forget that sometimes because Mark Borowiecki is such a hard-hitting brawler type of player on the ice, but Mark Borowiecki is such a class act. He really is. He's such a good locker room presence for this team. And so to see the Ottawa Senators organization pay respects to him, because that's the only team he ever played for, and he has a lot of good memories, I'm sure, with that organization. Really love seeing that. Good on the Ottawa Senators for respecting our guy Mark Borowiecki, who has been through so much personally, and yet he still brings it every night for this team. And it's just like, I mean, I know that we get sick of the penalties sometimes, but you know what? You can't coach passion. And Mark Borowiecki is probably one of the most passionate players you could ever ask for on a hockey team. I mean, you see it clearly with the way he plays. I know he's not the flashiest player. I know he's not going to score goals. And I know he's going to be in the penalty box a lot. But you know what? You can't coach passion. And that's what you see from Mark Borowiecki. I know that's what the Ottawa Senators fans saw. I know that's what the organization saw. And so it was cool to see him leave the mark on that organization and for them to pay respects to him tonight. You could definitely see how much it meant to Mark Borowiecki tonight during the game. And you just love to see stuff like that, because in the end, these players are humans, and we want to see wins, we want to see goals, and we want to see highlights and all this stuff. But in the end, these players are humans. These players have families. These players get really close to these organizations. They build lives in these hometowns where their teams are at. And so when you see an organization pay respects back to that player, it really means a lot. So that was really awesome to see. Good job by the Ottawa Senators for paying respects to Mark Borowiecki and all the things he did for that organization before he came to the Nashville Predators. Real quick, I want to hit on some cup favorites here going into as the playoff race really is starting to shape up. I mean, your obvious choice is the Colorado Avalanche in the West, but I wouldn't sleep on the Calgary Flames either. I do think that they are a really hard-hitting, tough team that did a lot of good things at the trade deadline. They've made their team better after the trade deadline. So I'm telling you right now, I do think the Colorado Avalanche on paper are probably the best team in hockey. But let's look at the Eastern Conference for a second. The Eastern Conference is going to be a bloodbath. There are going to be so many cup contending teams who are going to lose in the first round in the Eastern Conference playoffs. It's going to be just, murderer's row to see who makes it out of the first round in the Eastern Conference. Whereas the Western Conference, I feel like it's a little bit more top heavy. It's going to take a lot more upsets in the Western Conference, and you could probably pick chalk more in the Western Conference, whereas the Eastern Conference, good luck picking who you think is going to be out there with Tampa Bay, with Florida, with Carolina, with Washington, with Pittsburgh, with Boston. I can go on and on, Toronto. Whereas the West, you've got Colorado, you've got Calgary, maybe Edmonton because they got the superstar power, but really it comes down to the Eastern Conference. I will say a dark horse team that I really feel like could make some noise in the Western Conference is not the Nashville Predators. I'm sorry. I'm going to be objective here. I don't think it's the Nashville Predators. I do think the LA Kings you need to watch out for. The Los Angeles Kings have slowly been gradually building their team up over the years. They went through a rebuilding process, and they have built a nice, really good young team with some veterans. They've got a good blend. They got our guy, Victor Arvidsson, out there as well. And I got to say, if the Preds can't win it, I'd love to see Victor Arvidsson win a Stanley Cup this year. So that's my dark horse team, is the LA Kings to maybe win a Stanley Cup. But I'm calling it a dark horse because, honestly, it's probably going to come out of the Eastern Conference this year. But either way, the playoffs are almost here, and it's going to be a really, really, really fun playoffs, as it always is. It's really awesome to be at this time of year. And I really appreciate everyone joining me for the solo episode tonight as my co-host Rich Howe. is spending time with family tonight, which is always number one. Family's always number one. And so Rich will be back with me next week along with Kyle Perkins. Kyle Perkins has missed a lot of time with our podcast, also dealing with some stuff. He's coming back next week as well for Perks Picks on Catfish on Ice. So stay tuned for that. We've also got our interview coming up later on in episode 119 with Mason of Blues Fan Reacts and also SB Nation. He covers the St. Louis Blues. We're going to talk Blues and Preds rivalry. We're going to talk about the playoff race a little bit more from the Blues perspective and some other good stuff. That's going to be at the end of this episode. Stay tuned for that. This has been episode 119 of Catfish on Ice with Chad Minson, your host, brought to you by DraftKings, part of the Hockey Podcast Network. Stay tuned for that interview with Blues Fan Reacts. Thanks, everyone, for joining me. This is episode 119 of Catfish on Ice.